This is one of the most disturbing memories I have from my childhood. Something that still haunts me to this day. I was about 8 years old, just starting to understand how strange the world could be. My mom usually took me and my older cousin, Max, out trick-or-treating every Halloween, but that particular year, she had to work late. She arranged for me to go with my friend, Tyler, who lived a few blocks away. Tyler was about a year older than me, and we had become fast friends at school. He lived with his older brother, Eli, who was a bit of an enigma to me. Eli was around 19 or 20, and seemed to be Tyler's main caretaker since their mom was rarely home. Eli was distant, always locked in his room or out with friends, and he never spoke much when I was over. Tyler's house had a strange vibe. It always smelled like old furniture and cats. Though I'd never seen a single cat around, there were also strange things on the walls. Paintings of figures that looked like they were watching you, and furniture that seemed out of place. Eli never seemed to acknowledge me, and Tyler's mom, when I did meet her once, gave me the impression she was always elsewhere, mentally checked out from the household. That was probably why Tyler had so much freedom. That year, my mom dropped me off at Tyler's house, expecting that his mom or Eli would take us trick-or-treating. After saying goodbye to her, I walked inside to find Tyler and Eli sitting on the couch. I had my pillowcase ready to fill with candy, but something was off. There were no adults ready to go with us. "Isn't anyone coming with us?" I asked, feeling a little uneasy. Tyler shook his head with a grin. "Nah, we're going alone." Eli said we could handle it, no big deal. A rush of excitement mixed with fear hit me. I knew my mom wouldn't approve of us going unsupervised, but the idea of trick-or-treating without adults was thrilling. Max, Eli, and I set out just as the sun was setting, pillowcases in hand, ready to score as much candy as we could. For the first hour, it was great. People complimented our costumes, and we were quickly filling our bags. We moved through streets where kids still roamed in groups, their laughter echoing in the crisp night air. But as it got darker, fewer kids were out, and the houses became more spaced out. We were now on the edge of the neighborhood, venturing into quieter streets. We approached a small, dimly lit house at the end of a block we hadn't been to yet. As we knocked on the door, we noticed a man pushing an old-fashioned baby carriage coming toward us from the street corner. The sight of him immediately gave me chills. He wasn't wearing a costume, and the stroller was covered by a thick, dark canopy that concealed whoever or whatever was inside. The man's pace quickened as he approached, and soon he was standing right in front of us. "How's the trick-or-treating going, kids?" he asked, his voice a little too cheerful for the eerie scene. "Good," we mumbled in unison, clearly uneasy. "I'm heading back home with my little one," he said, gesturing to the carriage. "You boys want some candy? I've got loads left over. Didn't get to give much away tonight." The stroller had a bag of candy hanging from the handle, but something about this offer felt wrong. Yet when the man said his house was just around the corner and he had the good candy, Tyler's eyes lit up. "Yeah, what kind?" he asked. The man smiled a little too widely and pointed up the street. "Follow me, boys. I'll show you." Tyler started walking after him, and despite my instincts screaming to stay back, I followed. The man pushed the stroller in front of him, his head bent down as he occasionally whispered in a strange, sing-song voice to his baby. As we walked, I noticed something that sent a shiver down my spine. We had wandered far from the areas with other trick-or-treaters. It was just us and this man in a stroller under the dim orange glow of the streetlights. The silence was deafening. The man started asking us questions. "Where are you from? What grade are you in?" The usual small talk. Tyler answered casually, but I couldn't shake the growing dread gnawing at me. Something wasn't right. We finally reached his house. It was an old, dilapidated place with faded paint and an overgrown lawn. The man unlocked the door and motioned for us to follow him inside. "Come on in, I'll grab the candy," he said. Tyler started up the walkway, but I froze. Something inside me screaming not to go in. "I think we should leave the door open," I blurted out, trying to mask my fear. The man paused and looked at me. For a split second, his smile faded and his eyes grew cold. Then just as quickly, he grinned again. "Sure, buddy, no problem." We stepped inside, but I hung back near the door. The man wheeled the stroller into the living room, parking it in the middle of the room as he disappeared down a hallway, supposedly to fetch the candy. I stood by the doorway, eyes locked on that stroller. Something about it felt wrong. Tyler must have felt it too, because he started walking toward it. "What's in there?" he whispered to me. But before I could answer, he reached out and pulled back the canopy covering the stroller. Tyler's face went pale, and without a word, he backed away from the stroller. He turned to me, panic in his eyes. "Let's go," he hissed. We bolted for the door. As we ran outside, I glanced back at the stroller. Inside, there wasn't a baby. There was something much worse. A life-sized porcelain doll, its cracked face frozen in a silent scream. We didn't get far before we heard a woman's voice calling after us. "Excuse me, boys!" We turned around to see a neighbor coming toward us, her face lined with concern. "Do you know that man?" she asked, her voice low and urgent. Tyler quickly explained the situation, stumbling over his words as he mentioned the stroller and the doll. The woman's expression grew dark. "That man doesn't have a child," she said quietly. "I've seen him lurking around before. You're lucky you got out when you did." She insisted on driving us home, and although my instincts told me not to get into another stranger's car, we didn't have much choice. When we reached my house, the woman told my mom everything, her voice shaky with the details. My mom was horrified. She sent me to my room and called the police immediately. I never found out what happened to the man with the stroller. My parents kept me sheltered from whatever the police uncovered. I was never allowed to visit Tyler's house again, and our friendship slowly faded after that night. I still wonder what might have happened if we hadn't looked inside that stroller, or if we had followed the man into his house. But every Halloween, when I see kids trick-or-treating in the dark, I can't help but feel a chill. Sometimes I still think about that doll in the stroller, its eyes blank and lifeless, and I wonder, what was he planning to do with it? It was late October, and Halloween was falling on a Tuesday this year, so the big party night was the Saturday before. My friends and I had been scrambling to make plans, since everything seemed sold out, and we were hoping to crash a decent house party. We had some pretty funny costumes that we were eager to show off, so finding a good spot to hang out was our top priority. My friend Lily decided to take matters into her own hands and posted on her Instagram and Snapchat stories, asking if anyone knew of any parties that night. It's not something I would have done myself, kind of shameless, in my opinion, but I was glad she was willing to put herself out there. Surprisingly, not long after, Lily texted our group chat with details from someone about a house party. She sent a screenshot with the address, time, and some ground rules. No backyard access, bring your own drinks, and the most important one must bring at least one girl for every guy. Pretty sketchy, but house parties are usually chaotic, so we didn't think much of it. The guy who gave Lily the details was someone from our college named Ethan, who was friends with a lot of the same people we knew. He said a bunch of people from our social circle were planning to go, so we felt more comfortable about it. The house was only one town over, so after pre-gaming at Amy's house, we called an Uber and set off. We were 4 girls in total: Lily, Amy, Jess, and me. We were all feeling good, laughing and sipping on White Claws in the back of the Uber, not really thinking too hard about what kind of party we were walking into. When we pulled up to the house, the first thing we noticed was how huge and eerie it looked. The front yard was sprawling, and there were cars parked all along the street. Oddly enough, we didn't hear any loud music until we were right by the front door. That's when the bass thudding inside became audible. I knocked, and a man in his 50s answered. His face was lit up in a big, welcoming grin. "Hey ladies, welcome. "I'm Greg, the host's dad. Come on in." It was kind of strange to see someone's dad so involved in a college party, but we figured maybe he was just being nice. He showed us the way into the kitchen and offered to put our drinks in a big cooler. The party was dimly lit, with only orange Halloween lights strung across the ceiling. It was pretty packed with people, but weirdly, we didn't recognize anyone. Lily texted Ethan to see if he and his friends had arrived yet, while Greg kept hovering around us, chatting away. He offered us shots and asked about our costumes. His attention made me a little uneasy, but I figured maybe he was just one of those over-friendly types. He told us his son, Lucas, was hosting the party and that we'd probably run into him at some point. Still, I couldn't shake the odd feeling that this was a bit off. As the night went on, we made the best of it. We played beer pong with a couple of guys who approached us, and after a while, Lily got a text from Ethan saying they were on their way. Greg kept circling back to us, though, always offering drinks. At one point, he even yelled out our names, calling us to take shots with him at the kitchen counter. He had this strange enthusiasm that was starting to feel unsettling. There was just something off about how he was pushing drinks on us. After a while, Greg started making us mixed drinks without even asking. I wasn't sure what was in mine, but it tasted strong. I didn't want to be rude, so I sipped it slowly, already feeling the alcohol from earlier hitting me hard. Amy, Jess, and I were still playing beer pong when I noticed my phone wasn't charging. Even though I had plugged it into an outlet, I decided to just leave it alone instead of hunting for another plug in this weird, dark house. Soon after, our guy friends showed up, and that's when things took a turn. I don't remember much after they arrived. One minute I was laughing and talking to Eli, and the next, everything went black. The next thing I knew, I was being shaken awake in the back of a car. My vision was blurry, and I felt disoriented and dizzy, like my head was spinning out of control. I was confused, not even sure where I was at first, but soon realized I was in Eli's car, parked outside my house. My friends helped me inside, and I stumbled to bed, still woozy. The next morning, my phone buzzed with notifications. I had texts from a random number. My stomach turned when I opened the messages. It started with me texting, "Hey, it's Sarah," and the response was from Greg. "You looked so cute tonight." The timestamp showed it was sent while I was still at the party, but there was more. After a 2-hour gap, another message read, "Where did my favorite girls go?" My heart raced as I scrolled through the texts, wondering why I had given this creepy guy my number. That's when I got the next shock. "I'm outside your house. You left something here. Can you come to the door?" Followed by, "Hello, are you awake?" And finally, 3 missed calls. All of this had happened around 2 a.m. while I was blacked out. I felt sick to my stomach. I immediately texted the group chat, sharing the messages with the girls. They filled in the blanks for me. Apparently, as I started to get more and more out of it, Greg had been all over me, pushing more drinks. My friends grew concerned and got me out of there before things could get worse. They told me that just as we were leaving, 2 police cars pulled up, likely responding to a noise complaint. But what really shook me was what they said next. The house had no furniture, just a few tables for beer pong and coolers, but no couches, chairs, or even a proper setup. It was like the entire place was staged for the party. Eli later looked up the number Greg had used to text me. It was a VoIP number, a fake one. When I realized he had my real number, I panicked. If he could text me, he could potentially find my address. I blocked the number immediately. But the real kicker came when we decided to go to the police. We explained the entire situation and handed over the texts. When we mentioned the house, the officer on duty paused. "Was this the house party at the vacant property?" he asked. Our blood ran cold. Apparently, the neighbors had called in a complaint about a party at a house that had been empty for months. No one was supposed to be living there. We were brought in to speak to a detective, and they assured us they'd look into Greg and try to track the number. But to this day, we've heard nothing. No arrests, no follow-ups. The fact that this man went out of his way to host a fake party, lure young women, and use a vacant house to pull it off still haunts me. I can't help but wonder if Greg is still out there, planning another party at some other abandoned house, waiting for his next victims. It was Halloween night, 2018. My parents had asked me to stay home and hand out candy while they attended a party at a neighbor's house. I wasn't thrilled about it, especially since my mom had, once again, bought an absurd amount of candy. There were enough bags of chocolate and sweets to last a lifetime, and I knew I'd be the one munching on them for weeks to come, which was frustrating since I was trying to watch my weight. I always told her she overdid it every year. We lived in a quiet, secluded cul-de-sac on the edge of town. Normally, we didn't get many trick-or-treaters, just the local kids who knew we gave out a lot of candy. But even on busy years, it was never overwhelming. Halloween was on a Wednesday that year, and I happened to have a day off from my classes. I spent the first half of the day at the gym, then came home to catch up on some assignments. I knew by late afternoon the doorbell would start ringing. Sure enough, by around 4:30 p.m., the first kids started showing up. Little ghosts, witches, superheroes, and skeletons came by for candy, and my dog Max, a small but loud Jack Russell Terrier, would go into full barking mode every time the doorbell rang. Max wasn't exactly an intimidating guard dog, but his barks were constant. From the first group of trick-or-treaters until about 8 p.m., there were only around 15 or so kids. As I expected, not a huge turnout. Our house wasn't in the ideal spot for trick-or-treaters. Most of them probably skipped our cul-de-sac and continued to the busier streets. By 9 p.m., I figured the night was winding down, and I went upstairs to watch some Netflix and relax. I even let Max up on my bed so he wouldn't bark at any late-night stragglers. Just as I was getting comfortable, binging the latest episodes of my favorite show, the doorbell rang. I glanced at my phone. It was 9:45 p.m. It was late for trick-or-treaters. Max immediately started barking again, rushing to the front door. I sighed, assuming it was some teenagers looking for extra candy. But when I checked the door, I froze. Standing there, illuminated by the porch light, was a tall figure in a dark, unsettling clown costume. The mask was grotesque, distorted features with an eerie, menacing smile stretched across its face. I could tell immediately this wasn't a kid. The frame of the person was broad, much larger than any teen or adult I'd expect to see trick-or-treating this late. The figure waved at me slowly, then pointed to a sack hanging from his shoulder. The bag looked empty. My heart raced. I didn't open the door. Instead, I yelled through the glass, "Sorry, we're out of candy!" and slammed the door. Locking it, I stood there for a moment, listening. No footsteps, no movement, nothing. Max barked again, and I leaned closer to the door, peeking through the side window to see if the clown had left. But to my horror, he hadn't moved. He stood perfectly still, staring at the house, head slightly tilted. He rang the doorbell again. This time, Max went berserk, barking and growling as if he sensed something was wrong. My pulse quickened, and I scooped Max up, carrying him upstairs. I turned off all the lights downstairs, hoping to signal that we were done for the night. Back in my room, I placed Max on the bed and sat, trying to calm myself. I thought maybe it was just a prank. After all, it was Halloween, and people did stupid things. But something about that clown felt off, like he wasn't just there for candy. I texted my friend Ethan, telling him about the creepy guy outside. He texted back a laugh, saying it was probably just some loser looking to scare people. I wished I could believe that. Then I heard a loud snap from downstairs. I rushed to the top of the stairs, listening. The latch on the storm door had broken, and I could hear someone jiggling the front door handle. My heart pounded in my chest as I texted my parents, but they didn't respond. They were probably still at the party. I could feel my hands trembling as I tried calling them. No answer. The doorbell rang again, followed by loud knocks. Max started growling. I knew I couldn't stay there anymore. I grabbed Max, locked myself in my parents' bedroom, and called 911. As I spoke to the dispatcher, I could hear the knocking growing louder, more frantic, just as the dispatcher reassured me that police were on the way. The knocking stopped. I waited, holding my breath, listening for any sign that the man was still outside. Minutes passed, and finally, I heard the sirens approaching. The police arrived within 10 minutes. They searched the property, but no one was there. However, they did find something disturbing. Leaning against the side of the house was a ladder. The same ladder my dad kept in the garage. It had been used to reach the second-floor windows. I froze when I heard this. The man in the clown costume had been trying to get into the house, possibly through my bedroom window. The police advised me to stay somewhere else for the night. I packed up some things, grabbed Max, and drove to Ethan's house. I spent the night replaying the events in my head, wondering who that man was and what he had planned if I hadn't locked the door. To this day, I don't know if it was just a prank or if something more sinister was at play. But every Halloween since, I've been much more careful, and I always make sure all the windows are locked.